Oli here, and this is my review of The Brain of Morbius, the fifth story of the 13th season of classic Doctor Who, starring Tom Baker as the fourth Doctor. The Brain of Morbius is the 84th story overall. It's 4 parts long and is written by Terrence Dicks under the pseudonym of Robin Bland. This was due to the fact that Terrence Dicks wasn't actually happy with the rewrites that Robert Holmes did to the script, to the original script. So the plot of The Brain of Morbius is as follows. The Time Lords have taken control of the TARDIS, sending the Doctor and Sarah into dangerous territory. On the graveyard planet of Khan, the Eternal Sisterhood fights to keep the sacred flame alive. High in the castle, the brilliant surgeon Mahendri Solan conducts gruesome experiments on living flesh, and as the storm approaches, evil from the depths of Time Lord history plots its return to the land of the living. But is even the Doctor's mind a match for the Brain of Morbius? So that's the plot of the Brain of Morbius. Brain of Morbius. What an incredible story. I can see why it's seen as one of the very best of the Tom Baker era. So the production of the story was great. I like the sets of Khan. It looked very nice and very eerie. Especially where the castle where Solon was living, when it looked rather crude as well, because you can see it was very undecorated, and it was just bits and pieces of medical stuff just hanging around because he is a scientist after all, a mad scientist, so to speak. And the cliff sides of Khan looked really creepy as well. But the creepiness factor pretty much wasn't really there during the daytime. So obviously this story was set in day and night, and I think most of the middle part of the story was actually set in the daytime, and it doesn't really feel as scary as it did in the night. So yeah. And I really like the costume of the story. It looks very good, especially the Sisterhood of Khan's outfits and the whole makeup. It looked very cultish and very religion-y, and I also like the model of Morbius as well. He had like a mutant body with like a pincer for one arm, and then in another arm and an actual human hand for another. I think that was Condor's hand that was used. And it looked very creepy, and it was actually very creepy as well. Oh, and also then the direction by Christopher Barry was brilliant. I think this is probably the best story he's actually directed for classic Who. The scripts are great. Love the dialogue and all that. And I also like the little ritualistic dance the Sisterhood of Khan were doing as they're about to burn the Doctor to death. Before Sarah Jane actually came and rescued him. I really like the score of this story. It was very intimidating, especially the little motif that was playing when the Sisterhood of Khan were about to perform a ritual or do something. It was very creepy, and it definitely added to the tension of the story. The plot of The Brain of Morbius was actually very good. Obviously taking inspiration from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So the Frankenstein elements were pretty obvious, such as the mad scientist in Solon, who is dim-witted but somewhat good-natured with the assistant in Condor. The Frankenstein and aspect was done very well, and this story is pretty much the strongest showing of any gothic elements in the Hinchcliffe era because of the Frankenstein inspiration, and Frankenstein itself is pretty gothic as well. So, and even from the start, you can see how dark it is when in the beginning of the story, Condor pretty much brings in the disembodied head of an insect creature, plus Condor getting shot in the stomach by Solon, and you can actually see a bit of blood coming out of Condor's shirt. The Brain of Morbius also introduced some elements that will appear in future Doctor Who stories. For instance, the Time Lords not being who they say they were, and how, when I say this, how they were pretty much implied to be godlike, advanced, and invincible, as implied in previous stories, especially when the second Doctor is pretty much saying in the War Games that the Time Lords can pretty much live forever, barring any accidents. And even, I think in this part of the story, I think the Doctor pretty much condemns the Sisterhood of Khan for choosing immortality over regeneration, by saying that regeneration is actually good and not just living forever. And this is actually built upon later in The Deadly Assassin, which was written by Robert Holmes, and actually does say the Time Lords aren't actually invincible, or they actually do die because they find out that Time Lords actually have a limit of 13 regenerations, and then after the 13th regeneration they pretty much die. We also see the debut of the Sisterhood of Khan, a female Gallifreyan society dedicated to protecting the sacred flame, which actually produced the elixir, which was actually used to produce the elixir of life. They don't appear in any story again after the story, save for some Big Finish stories, until the Night of the Doctor, which explained how the F Doctor regenerated. And of course, they play a part in New Who Series 9. I think the Sisterhood are very creepy women, but they had good intentions. Another plot point that pretty much caused a stir, I think back then, even as of today, it pretty much still causes a stir, was the mind-bending contest between the Doctor and Morbius in Part 4. And in this contest, it pretty much implies that the Doctor had actually previous incarnations even before Hartnell. So I think that pretty much caused a stir. But I think, in my personal opinions, I think those faces were actually Morbius's faces, and obviously the faces that were used, I think, were used by some producers. I think Robert Holmes's face showed up, Hinchcliffe's face showed up, and Terence Dix's face showed up in that. So it was pretty fun to see that. But even I think the New Who finale in series 12 New Who finale, the Timeless Children actually brought this aspect up and pretty much strengthened the theory that those faces were actually the Doctor's, but I think it was just part of the Doctor's memory, as how we saw like the Delgado's master and all the other villains and all that. I think that was just pretty much a memory. I don't think it really confirmed anything, even though that there was that theory of the Doctor being the Timeless Child herself. But yeah, so onto the pacing of the Brain of Morbius. I mean, part 1 does have a slow start, but the parts 2, 3, and 4 pretty much are paced very well and doesn't really derail any momentum. It does have its fair share of memorable moments, such as the Doctor and Morbius' mind-bending contest. And you also liked how the bit where Sarah Jane pretty much escaped from Solon's castle by faking being drugged, how she was able to escape, and how she was able to rescue the Doctor by dressing up as one of the members of the Sisterhood and she was able to free the Doctor before Marvin actually blinded her, or shortly afterwards. I mean, that was pretty cool of Sarah. And I wonder how she was able to get the clothes, because I wonder if she was able to like attack one of the members, or maybe there was a bit of their clothes lying around, but who knows. And obviously, Morbius' death was great to watch. And obviously, the sisters had actually backed him up against the edge of a cliff, and he fell backwards. And then you just see Morbius just spinning around, and he pretty much dies. So on to the acting of the story, which was superb in my opinion. And Tom Baker, great as always. I think this is one of his best performances in this season, and obviously in the Tom Baker era as a whole. And this story is obviously one of the best of showing how the fourth Doctor's humor pretty much shines through even in the darkest of stories. I really, and especially the part when he was intentionally stalling Marvin, trying to get the Sisterhood to kill him when he was brought to the Sisterhood of Khan's domain. I think obviously Khan was actually thought the Doctor was going to steal all the elixir, the sacred flame, because I think the elixir of life, or because the sacred flame was actually running out. But it was actually quite cool. So I also liked his performance during the mind-bending contest, and I also found it funny how he was able to recognize Morbius before fainting due to the drink that Solon spiked. Elizabeth Sladen was great as well as Sarah Jane, and she also does a lot of great things in the story, such as faking being affected by Solon's poison. So yeah, or when he spiked the drinks, and rescuing the Doctor from the Sisterhood of Khan when they were about to kill him before she got blinded by Marvin. So one of my other complaints is I think when Sarah was blinded, I think she became a bit irritable, but I think her acting really pretty much saved Sarah in the story, because she does do some great things when she's blind, such as locking Solon in the room with Morbius's brain, and she was able to escape. And I also liked how she was trying to navigate her way through the cliffside blind so to speak, before she's caught by Condor. Condor, yeah. Yeah, and I think that's when he was starting to say, "Oh, you're pretty" and stuff like that. I think Sarah Jane, Elizabeth Sladen really acted her ass off in that scene as well. And I also like I also found it funny how during the Doctor's and Morbius's mind-bending contest, I think Sarah was a bit worried. So I think Elizabeth Sladen actually accidentally called out Tom Baker's name. Even in the DVD subtitles, it actually says Tom. I wonder why they left it in there. I suppose so. I think Sarah Jane. I think Elizabeth Sladen's one of her best performances actually comes from this story itself. So on to the side cast of the story. They were minimal, but we only had like three major side characters, and they were Condor. First of all, we had Condor. I think he was the servant of Solon. He's not the sharpest tool in the shed, but he was very loyal to Solon. He was very obsessed with getting his arm back from Solon, and Solon actually promised to do so. And one thing I actually liked about Condor was how when he and Solon went to the Sisterhood to try and get the Doctor to get them to give the Doctor back to him so he can get the Doctor's head, he pretty much offered he pretty much offered the Sisterhood to sacrifice Condor instead, but Condor didn't really like that. So when they got back home, and Condor pretty much tried to kill Solon before Solon slammed his right and promised to give him his arm back. So obviously he had a bit of an obsession with Sarah's hair, and it was a little bit creepy. But then Coda had a good death when Morbius pretty much finished him off. I really liked his character, and I think it made sense for him to die at that point. Maureen, she was the leader of she was the leader and the high priestess of the Sisterhood of Khan. She was very antagonistic against the Doctor for very good reason, because she thought he was after. She thought that he and the Doctor and the Time Lords were after the elixir of life and the sacred flame as well. I think she later warmed up to the Doctor, and she actually tried to help him defeat Morbius and stop Solon. And she actually, after the mind-bending contest, the Doctor is pretty much near death, and Marvin decides to sacrifice herself to save the Doctor, which is a common theme in Doctor Who anyway. So she was a very good character. And we also had Ohika. She was one of the priestesses in the Sisterhood of Condor. I think she was Marvin's right hand woman. She was a great character. She doesn't really do a whole lot other than just give Marvin some information and also be antagonistic to the Doctor as well. And I think her character is actually related to Ohila, another Sisterhood member that actually appeared in The Night of the Doctor and Series 9 of New Who. And the reason why I think they're kind of related because their names were quite similar. And I actually thought, when I was watching the story again, I actually thought they were the same person. So it was nice to see some sort of link. Even I think Stephen Moffat actually confirmed that Ohila was pretty much a reference to Ohika in this story. The enemies of the story, first off we had Mahendri Solon. He was a scientist and a follower of Morbius. Solon was hell-bent on reviving Morbius after having his brain and needed a head to try and revive Morbius. And he was actually obsessed with the Doctor's head when he saw the Doctor. And when he found out the Doctor was a Time Lord by checking his heart, he knew that it was going to work because the issue of tissue rejection wouldn't really be there. So I also liked how he was obsessed with the Doctor's head, because even when he went to the Sisterhood and asked them asking to give him the Doctor back to him, and obviously they said no. He even tried to said you can kill him, but I want his head. But then the Sisterhood still didn't heed on. So yeah, so he was late. So Solon was pretty much killed by cyanide gas by the Doctor, which was activated by the Doctor, because the Doctor thought it would actually affect Morbius, but it actually didn't really harm Morbius at all. So it actually pretty much killed Solon. It was a bit of a easy exit for Solon, but it made sense because he didn't really need to do any more afterwards. But I think Solon was a great villain, and Philip Maddock did a really good job performing as Solon. We also had Morbius. He was a renegade Time Lord that was executed by the Time Lords on Khan, and obviously Maven witnessed his execution, and she didn't believe the Doctor when he suggested that Morbius could be coming back. His brain was recovered, and his brain was pretty much in the jar, and he pretty much spoke to Solon somehow. Was pretty much giving him orders. He doesn't do a whole lot, but after Solon successfully revives him, he actually gets to do some heavy villainy work, such as killing one of the members of the Sisterhood. And then, as I mentioned before, I think And as I mentioned before, the model of Morbius is actually done very well with the claw hand and Condor's hand in the other arm. So it was pretty scary to say the least. He could have done a bit more, but at the same time, it wouldn't have really made sense. But I think the voice of Morbius was very scary and was actually very domineering as well, and that was pretty cool. So the faults in this story aren't as severe, but I would say there are very noticeable plot holes. Obviously, one fault I have is Sarah Jane, as I mentioned before. I think I think this is why when Sarah Jane started to become a bit wimpy, because all the feminist aspects that she had in season 11 are pretty much no longer in this story. So, but obviously, I think what makes up for it is how Sarah Jane is able to do some epic things blind when she was able to lock Solon in the room of Morbius. I think her wimpiness pretty much comes in later on, well, in a few stories time. So it's not really as bad here as it was in, let's say, the Mask of Mandragora. So on to the actual faults in the story, but I wouldn't say they're faults, but I would say it's just as a bit of a plot hole. For example, they never make it clear why the Time Lords sent the Doctor to Khan. I think is we know that the Time Lords were concerned about Morbius, but they never actually have. But we actually had a feeling about it. Actually, I even forgot about it, but I think it was pretty obvious that there should have been a scene where the Doctor realized that the Time Lords were actually sent the Doctor to Khan to try and stop Morbius, but yeah, it's a bit but I think the whole Time Lords aspect was pretty much forgotten about when the story pretty much progressed. So to conclude, The Brain of Morbius is a fine example of Gothic Doctor Who, and a story that pretty much starts to delve in to the history of Time Lord mythology and the Time Lords themselves. So I give The Brain of Morbius a 10 out of 10. Woo! So my next review will be the season 13 finale, The Seeds of Doom. So thank you for watching this review. Please let me know what you thought of The Brain of Morbius and this review itself. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already and just coming across this video. And if you want to have a chat with me, please join my Discord server. It's in the description box below. Until then, see you later.